Hi, I'm Scott Peters, founder of SafeFootball and the Bridge and Buckle Advanced Leverage System. Thanks for joining me today as I detail the 4-step progression of the bridge technique. But before I show you the most powerful position the human body can use to maximize leverage for initiating contact in football, I want to show you why the old method is not only endangering the players who use it, but it's inferior from the competitive standpoint as well. Some coaches like to call the old method the hat then hands method. I call this method the horizontal push because of the angles incorporated by the body when executing this antiquated and dangerous technique. If you're unfamiliar with the horizontal push, you won't have to look very far since this technique is still in practice virtually everywhere football is played. But here's a look at its basic principles. As you can see here, the horizontal push places heavy emphasis on the use of the helmet to make initial contact with an opponent. Once the helmet has struck the opposing player, the hands then follow by making contact with the chest plate. Players are then taught to roll their hips to finish. The horizontal strike relies on foot traction, with the helmet and torso out in front of the body and in front of the hips. The feet remain behind the body as the player drives forward, similar to what it looks like when attempting to push a car. So why is the horizontal strike not good for football? Imagine you're trying to slide a brick off your coffee table. Would you start by flicking the brick with your fingernail before sliding it off the table with steady force from your hand? Highly doubtful. This analogy is really no different when it comes to football. Your fingernail, like your head, is clearly not the most advantageous way to generate force to move an object. In football, the stakes are much higher because unlike our fingernail, our brain serves as our operating system, which dictates the quality of life long after our playing days are over. Think about it. When was the last time you used your head to shut your car door or to move furniture around your house? It doesn't make much sense. And our thinking has been backwards when it comes to playing football. SafeFootball promotes using our brain to innovate, to think, and to live a productive life. The helmet was meant to protect your face and the contents inside your skull, not to punish your opponent. If we use our hands properly, by using the bridge technique, it is possible to enjoy the best of both worlds, to play at your highest potential and to spare your brain for your life ahead. We believe the game is won and lost based on the one-on-one matchups. And as a former player, I understand the importance of player development and know it starts with teaching. The goal of SafeFootball is to give players the tools to empower them by putting their success and safety into their own hands. The bridge technique is different because it allows players to generate maximum force without momentum, allowing the hands to transfer energy and gain a competitive advantage through the mechanics of the vertical lift, as opposed to leaning and striking head first. The idea that pad level is the main ingredient for gaining leverage is like saying the mustard on your burger is what made you fat. In reality, low pad level means very little, but the angle, trajectory, and sequence of the hip roll means everything, as you will soon see with the bridge technique. Another common misconception is the emphasis of size as a performance factor for creating leverage. While size may make opposing players more effective with the horizontal push, the bridge neutralizes it, because the bridge does not require gravity to dig into the turf, if and when done properly. For example, if you've ever tried to run in a swimming pool, you'll notice it's very difficult. The water nullifies the effect of gravity, and it's virtually impossible to generate the traction and forward lean required to push off the pool's surface. The horizontal push technique is no different. Conversely, the bridge method can be executed in the water because it's based on vertical lift, not horizontal push, as the hips remain underneath center mass, aligning with the ankles and the armpits. Now that I've discounted some of the most common misconceptions related to leverage, you're probably excited to see how the bridge technique actually works. Before I show you how to execute these 4 steps of the bridge technique, I want to explain why it's superior. Leonardo da Vinci recognized the human body was very similar to architecture in terms of optimal angles and proportion. The strongest geometric shape used in architecture is the parabola, or the arch, followed by the triangle. Both of these shapes are found in the world's strongest load-bearing design, the arch bridge. Now that we've covered the science behind the strength of this technique, let's see how this is applied in other human performance capacities. Right now, we're going to take a look at the Greco-Roman suplex. In this technique, we're going to see wrestlers launching other wrestlers over their head by using the same principles that make the bridge effective, the hips. Here we have the Atlas stone, which is a strongman competition. The only way to lift a boulder weighing more than 500 pounds is to achieve an arc of the hips while remaining aligned with the ankles and the armpits. As we move into the fundamentals of the bridge, I want to address the players who can use it. And in the interest of time, we're going to classify players into 2 categories. line of scrimmage players, or players who are less than 2 yards from their opponent prior to the snap, and depth players, or players who engage their opponent from 2 yards or greater. Essentially, the bridge can be used by any player who engages an opponent across the line of scrimmage prior to the tackle. In general, this includes everyone but kickers and quarterbacks. In the case of depth players, it's important to come to balance before initiating the first step of the bridge. Here's a look at what we're referring to by coming to balance. To get the most power and body control when engaging your opponent from a running start, you're going to want to collect yourself by widening your feet with small, choppy steps as you transition from a running start into the bridge technique. Now that we've differentiated depth players from line of scrimmage players, let's get on with the progression. When each of the 4 steps are executed correctly, the hips will resemble a wrecking ball as they explode on contact. To ensure you're properly loading your wrecking ball, proper coiling of the body is important, which brings us to step 1 of the progression, the coil. Step 1, coiling for contact. In order to deliver maximum power output, we're going to need to spring load the hips and the hands before contact. Let's look at each aspect of the coil starting from the ground up. Your feet are your foundation for the bridge technique. Since football requires a combination of power and quick multi-directional movements, it's important to get the spacing, angles, and distribution of weight working in our favor. The coil is referencing the first step, which we will take as we simultaneously load our hips and our upper extremities. Your feet should be spaced slightly outside the width of your shoulders and your toes pointed out to achieve an approximate 90-degree angle. Try to find a comfortable position, allowing your feet to angle out, which will allow the hips to come to full extension when making contact. The distribution of your weight should be on the insteps, with most of the pressure on the balls of the feet, the inside of the arch, and the big toe. This allows us to have as much of our foot on the ground as possible in order to create a vertical lift when we strike, tying in the entire kinetic chain from the bottom of your feet through the palms of the hands. Knee bend is important, although the angles vary situationally. Contrary to popular belief, like pad level, knee bend is not the source of power and it doesn't necessarily influence execution. More important than knee flexion is the relationship of our ankles and hips. Knees should be inside the ankles and outside the hips. From the lateral view, the hips remain behind the head in a flexed position, setting us up for the next step, which is the uncoil. You should have a forward body lean or a tilt in your spine at approximately 45 degrees, keeping your lower back arched while maintaining a tight core. Traditionally, players are taught how to attack their opponent without understanding defenses and counter moves. The bridge and buckle system is slightly different, especially for offensive players, in that we teach attacks, defenses, and counter moves in each phase of our curriculum. While the bridge is an attack, it features built-in defenses as well, as it's important to limit our target for opponents. In football, our target is our chest plate. To be in a position to both deliver and to defend, we want to narrow our target by rolling the shoulders slightly forward with our helmet out in front. When we draw our hands back in a V formation, with our hands open and our thumbs facing upwards, our elbows will graze our sides as they do not exceed the center line of the spine from lateral view. Some coaches teach players to grab their 6 guns, and this is a big mistake. While it's important we load the hands, drawing them back to the hips exposes our chest to opposing players. And contrary to rational thinking, it doesn't generate any more power. By keeping the face out in front with the hands drawn in a tight V and the shoulders rolled forward, we have successfully coiled our body in anticipation of the uncoil. Step 2, the uncoil. With the elbows tied to the hips, grazing the sides at 90 degrees, we will initiate the uncoiling of the hands with a 45-degree trajectory as we simultaneously pound the second step into the ground. The helmet rocks back as the hips thrust forward at a 45-degree rolling trajectory, just like the wrecking ball. If you're doing it properly, the helmet and the hips will swap positions, and your ankles are directly underneath your armpits. Our hips are now closer to the arc strength position, but they're still not fully extended. We're going to wait for the strike and the latch and screw to finish the arc. Step 3, the strike. Now that we've coiled and uncoiled our hips and hands, it's time to deliver the strike. While our hips continue extension, our hands will make contact at a rolling 45-degree angle. Both the hips and the hands should appear to be tied together from lateral view. We achieve power synergy by exploding the hips and hands together in unison. In the buckle series, we teach some pretty slick methods to counter or recover leverage when we miss with our hands or our opponent beats us for inside position. But the best cure is prevention, so it's important we take our best shot when firing the hands. The aiming point or the target of the hands is the outer portion of the chest plate, and our eyes should be fixated on it. The proper grip for the bridge is called the shake fit. This technique will deliver optimal power on contact while saving your fingers. We call it the shake fit because your hand is in the handshake position, with exception of the fingers. Your fingers will remain bent and relaxed as they make soft contact, fitting in within the armpits. It is critical the thumbs remain facing up and the elbows remain tight to the body throughout the play. One of the biggest mistakes players make is striking an opponent with their elbows out and the thumbs facing in, similar to that of the bench press position. This reduces power output tremendously, as it shuts off the vertical lifting mechanism tied to our kinetic chain, and it relies on smaller muscle groups like the triceps to get the job done. This is why many players naturally strike with the helmet first, regardless of their bench press ability. With the elbows out, the hands are collapsible and the chest is available. The second most common mistake usually accompanies the elbows out method. Many guys will make first contact with their fingertips and not the heel of their hands. When the fingers make contact prior to the heels, we lose kinetic energy where it counts, as the heel is slowed down by the fingers, which is the weakest and softest part of our hand. The palms, or the heel of our hands, remain at 90 degrees in a vertical angle, making contact with the hard plastic chest plate following the fingers, which are bent and make soft entry on the softest part of the opponent, which is his armpits. Step 4, the latch and screw. Once we've shocked the opponent with our strike, it's time to secure our fit on the chest plate for greater control. We call this the latch and screw. You're going to latch the elbows down and in while gripping the chest plate with your fingers and thumbs. Screw your thumbs outward at a 45-degree angle or greater if possible. Once your hands are secure, walk your hip bones toward the elbows, securing them in place upon the buttress as you bring your hips to full extension and either finish your block or shed for the tackle. We call the groove above the hip bones the buttress, and with the elbows drawn in, it prevents elbow collapse while the energy of your hips is transferred onto your opponent. You now know the 4-step progression to achieve the most powerful position in football, the bridge technique. If you develop the skills presented in these 4 steps and apply them to your game, you will experience power you never thought possible. Please subscribe to our online video library at SafeFootball.com for total access to hundreds of cutting-edge tips and techniques for players, coaches, and parents at all levels of football. Thanks for watching, and remember, you have the power to take the game and your health into your own hands.